Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Thursday, January the 1st, 2026. Happy New Year! And in this video, I do want to look at the year ahead to some extent. I mean, in particular, I want to look at the positions of the planets, right at the beginning of the year and consider what that might mean for the whole of 2026. I mean, the new year is a political event. It's a calendar event. It's not like an equinox or a solstice. It hasn't got any sort of scientific or astronomical specialness to it. But, politically, it is a big event. When we have the stroke of midnight, so, we all know that it is a new year. So there could be an argument for taking a horoscope for the moment we have the new year, and the moment you hear the whatever it is, the sixth beep on the radio or whatever it is you listen to tell you that it is the new year, and that can be important. Maybe that will tell us something about the year ahead. By the way, I've got a photo on the thumbnail. That's my dog. I mean, why have I got my dog on the thumbnail? Well, why not? She was curled in a ball, and I took a photo of her, and that's what she looked like. I think that photograph was taken yesterday or something. So anyway, that's something I thought I'd better let you know about. Why is my dog on the thumbnail? So before I look at 2026, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for the first day of the year. So here is the chart for noon, New York time, Thursday, January the 1st, 2026. Don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. So what is happening? What is happening today? Moon is in Gemini, firmly in Gemini, right in the middle of the sign, and the Moon doesn't really make any aspects in Gemini. It is going to make a square to Saturn tomorrow, Friday, and then of course it will make a square to Neptune. But where it is, it's not doing anything, and the Moon is okay. It's not void because it is applying to that square of Saturn, but I think I've got the phrase right to say that it's kind of feral. A feral is a condition of the Moon where it's just not going anywhere short term. And I mean, okay, technically you've got, in traditional astrology, you've got orbs between two planets. Different pairs of planets have different orbs in traditional astrology, at least in traditional astrology as laid out by astrologers such as William Lilly in the 17th century. But I would regard the Moon as really short term, going nowhere. But it is in Gemini, and aside from that, Mercury is doing things. Mercury is applying to a square of Neptune. Whether or not it's applying kind of depends where you are. I think that exact square between Mercury and Neptune takes place at 1:33 p.m. London time, so it'll be in the morning if you're in the Americas. But let's not worry about the precise timing of that Mercury square Neptune. That Mercury square Neptune does say something about the day, and Mercury square Neptune can be a confusing influence. We may get the wrong ideas. On the other hand, Neptune can be associated with spirituality. Maybe we have perceptions about the way things are going. I mean, that's something we often have on New Year's Day. New Year's Day being about sort of contemplating the year ahead. What is the year ahead going to be like? And we might have good intentions with Mercury square Neptune, but we might also be aware of certain undercurrents that at least at an unconscious level, are indicating where things might be going. Mercury square Neptune also can be quite artistic and creative, so maybe you should give your imagination free rein, up to a point. Additionally, Mercury is moving into Capricorn, so Mercury moves into Capricorn. I think it's at 11 minutes past 9 in the evening, London time. So that's going to be in the afternoon if you're in the Americas. So Mercury moving into Capricorn. I think for many of us, that is going to be a big relief because, Mercury's been on and off in Sagittarius. Okay, it went back into Scorpio and whatever, but, since the end of October. And Mercury in Sagittarius, it's not a great place for Mercury, to be honest. I mean, it's in its detriment in Sagittarius. Maybe it jumps to conclusions. It's maybe Mercury in Sagittarius is not as intelligent as it should be. I'm not saying anything about people's horoscopes. If you've got Mercury in Sagittarius in your horoscope, you work that out in your own way. I think it's more of a problem if Mercury in Sagittarius is just in the sky at the time something is happening. And so with Mercury moving into Capricorn, we start to have really a very earthy chart with four personal planets in Capricorn, and that situation is going to continue for a week or two before those planets start to move out. And one thing about Mars is in Capricorn. Mars is on the United States' sun, and at the end of this video I am going to be talking about the United States because I think there is evidence that things are not as stable as they should be, and that leads to another thing going on. It's not just Mercury moving into Capricorn; it's Mars making a sesquiquadrate to Uranus. Again, an aspect I'll be talking about later in the video. But having Mars sesquiquadrate Uranus on New Year's Day, I mean, is that such a good thing? Mars sesquiquadrate Uranus because you've got Mars in Capricorn, sesquiquadrate Uranus in Taurus is not necessarily especially stable. It can be accident prone, and when you think about war and violence and so forth, you often think about Mars and Uranus. So having Mars Uranus sesquiquadrate on New Year's Day, as I will be saying later in the video, may not just say something about today, it may say something about the whole year because it happens on New Year's Day. And so, I don't know, thinking about today in a short term, well, don't do anything dangerous. Take it easy. It's not a time for taking risks. And this Mars sesquiquadrate Uranus, is going to impact different people in different ways. It's kind of dependent on their sign. I'm slightly bothered by a Mars in Capricorn because I've got my, I think my midheaven is at 14 Capricorns. I'm about to have Mars on my midheaven, and I'm kind of thinking about this. I'm going to have Sun on my midheaven as well. I mean, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I mean, Mars is exalted in Capricorn, so that's not so bad. On the other hand, Mars is Mars, so we'll have to see what happens. I'm not employed, so I don't have an opportunity to lose my job. With Mars, I'm self-employed, but so that can't happen. But the midheaven can manifest in different ways. Midheaven is the mother. My mother isn't alive, so it can't be anything to do with her. So it's something I'm thinking about. Maybe it's just some dynamic energy coming in with this Mars on the midheaven. Maybe this is time I have to sort out the memberships part of my YouTube channel, which I've been promising to do for some time. Anyway, you don't want to hear about me. So that's the overall picture for today, set for New York. If we turn to Sydney, Australia, the moon is still in Gemini. I don't really think there's any great difference between Sydney or rather sort of Australia and New Zealand and the Americas. You've still got the fundamental themes of Mercury square Neptune, Mars sesquiquadrate Uranus, and yes, the moon in Gemini. And as far as the heliocentric view is concerned, now don't forget one thing: the Sun is starting to make a conjunction to Mars. All of us are going to be feeling this, and so when you look at a heliocentric chart, a Sun-Mars conjunction becomes an Earth-Mars opposition, as we can see here. So the Earth is at 11 Cancer. It's moving towards an opposition of Mars at 14 degrees Cancer. So the midpoint, the Venus-Mars midpoint is what, 6, 3, it's about 11. So Earth is on the Venus-Mars midpoint. And with Earth on the Venus-Mars midpoint, well, you could say Venus-Mars is about attraction. It may be a time when, some of us really, want to be attractive, feel the need to be attractive, and it may be about what people are trying to pretend to be. I mean, they're trying to be persuasive, really. Seductive even, with Earth on the Venus-Mars midpoint. But the question is, will it work? So, do be careful, about what people say. Yeah, people can be very convincing, but you have to consider, what is their motivation. I mean, it is possible that you can see Earth on the Venus-Mars midpoint as being somewhat similar to the Sun on the Venus-Mars midpoint. And of course, we have the Sun on the Venus-Mars midpoint. We know this. This is something we have geocentrically. So, what we're seeing here is just a reflection of what we know already. And so, Sun on the Venus-Mars midpoint, I've been talking about it a lot geocentrically, and it is quite an attractive combination. It is a time where some of us really can be appealing, and if we wanted to be desirable, maybe we can be desirable, if we've got the opportunity and if we adopt the right approach. So yeah, I would have said heliocentrically, Earth on the Venus-Mars midpoint. Well, we get the idea of opposition as well, which we don't get geocentrically. And so Earth opposition Venus-Mars might be, the struggle to be attractive, the struggle to get people to pay attention to us, the struggle to make everyone think that we're wonderful. Or maybe it's not our struggle, it's someone else's struggle, someone else desperate for attention, really trying hard, but maybe they try too hard. Additionally, we've got Mercury sextile Pluto, and you could say that that's more of the same. I mean, Mercury sextile Pluto is trying to trying to communicate powerfully, and possibly getting away with it. So if we've got something we want to deliver, a message we want to deliver, maybe with Earth opposition to Venus-Mars midpoint and Mercury sextile Pluto, maybe we can be successful. So that's the heliocentric view, and now I want to look at the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Thursday, January the 1st, 2026. Aries. Like yesterday, you're probably feeling a certain amount of freedom. You can do largely what you want. You can go where you like. You can even say what you like short term. I don't think that it's going to have much of an impact. The moon is not going anywhere. It's not that the moon is void of course, because the moon eventually makes a square to Saturn, but it doesn't make the square to Saturn today. And so that might mean, Aries, that your words and your actions perhaps don't have as much impact as you'd like them to. But on the other hand, as I've just said, that does give you more freedom, because you don't have to worry about other people's reactions. And so that might be something to be happy about. But there is a question of how far do you go? I think in this sort of day-to-day sense, hour-to-hour sense, it does appear that not much is going on. On the other hand, we cannot avoid the fact that Mars is making a sesquiquadrate to Uranus. Now, I will be talking about this sesquiquadrate to Uranus later in the video because I do think it's important. But Mars is your ruler. If it's making a sesquiquadrate to Uranus, that might mean that you do have to be, ever so slightly careful. I mean, Mars sesquiquadrate Uranus can be an aspect that is accident prone. While it is the case that you can have a quiet day, you don't want to push it and so forth. If you push it, if you're an Aries who feels it's a new year, New Year's Day, we've got to have something happening, then it might be a different situation. And so, if you want action, Aries, yes, you can find it. But the question is, are you prepared to pay the price? And I think that there could be quite a substantial price if you push things too far. You might feel that it's necessary, and you shouldn't forget also that the Sun is moving towards a conjunction of Mars. So maybe this impression that nothing is going on that I talked about at the beginning of this piece on Aries is misleading. And if you really push it, then things might happen. And the question is, do you want to push it? I would suggest that you probably don't. I don't think it's a good idea. I mean, if you want to shout, you can. You can be heard, but people are not necessarily going to respond, and that might be a reason why, Aries, you feel you want to escalate. And the question is, how far do you want to escalate? I talked about the moon not making any aspects. In the end, the moon makes a square to Saturn, so it could be that if you take things too far, you might pay the price tomorrow, for example, when that moon square Saturn becomes exact. So I think, Aries, my overall advice would be to not do very much, at least in a dramatic way. If you want to do things which are sort of solid and you want to sort of move towards the achievement of your aims, particularly as Mercury is moving into Capricorn, I think that you can, or not just today but tomorrow as well, because you're about to have 4 planets in Capricorn, and with 4 planets in Capricorn, Aries, that's great. I mean, particularly if you're ambitious, you can think about whatever it is you want to achieve, whatever it is you want to get off the ground, and you can make it happen, but you must not be in a hurry. And as far as today is concerned, it's the beginning of the year. Things are a bit fragile, especially with that Mars sesquiquadrate Uranus. And if you try to get attention, your first attempts might fail because the moon isn't really going anywhere. Yeah, you could escalate, but I just don't think it's worth the effort. Taurus. The moon is still in Gemini, and so with the moon in this sign, part of you may feel that not a huge amount is going on. Gemini is a sign. It's a sign following Taurus, and the moon, when the moon is in Gemini, you're kind of thinking about your own resources and what you have and what you don't have. You might like to do something to maybe enrich yourself or to clarify something of a financial nature. But I think that it might not necessarily be easy. It is New Year's Day, but it's possibly worth your while giving it some thought. I mean, the moon tomorrow does make a square to Saturn, so that might suggest that when it comes to money, do take it easy, and don't be in too much of a rush to resolve things, and certainly don't be in too much of a rush to spend money. I don't think that would be desirable at all, because in the end, Moon does make that square to Saturn. So if you do spend money, particularly on non-essential items today, you might soon realize that actually it's just a waste of money, and that you should have just denied yourself that short-term pleasure. Short-term pleasure, that's all it is. Now, aside from the Moon in Gemini, we do have a sesquiquadrate between Mars and Uranus. And Mars-Uranus sesquiquadrate is arguably the main aspect of the day. And it could be said that Mars sesquiquadrate Uranus sets up the year. I mean, it's a difficult aspect. And why it might be relevant to you is because it might say something about other people, the people around you, the people you have to deal with, and their behavior and their attitude. There seems to be a bit of an issue here. Some people may be just too hasty, they may be accident prone, they may be in a hurry, and the question is, what do you do? And perhaps it's a time when you have to just observe. You can observe people in action. You don't have to be part of it. You can perhaps be a restraining influence, if possible, but it might be difficult, because we shouldn't forget that, Venus is your ruler, and it's getting really close to the Sun, really close. I mean, Venus is now at 10 degrees 6 Capricorn. The Sun is at 11:17 Capricorn. So the Sun-Venus conjunction is getting close, and Venus is combust, and so you might find that something is starting to maybe overwhelm you, or at least prevent you from getting a clear image of the way things should be. And what might it be? Well, it could be just something about your surroundings. There is you're trying to elevate yourself, you're perhaps trying to move to the next level, whatever that means, and then you have to deal with stuff perhaps relating to your home or your family, and things wanting your attention, and it's difficult to turn your back on your roots and on whatever it is that grounds you. But sometimes these things can be a negative. So it's true that your family are important in most cases, but that doesn't mean that you should give your family too much precedence, because where there's a family member, there could be a distraction, and you may not be able to see the wood for the trees. And so you've got to certainly pay attention to your home and family, but you can't allow it to sort of dominate proceedings, and that is the case over the next few days. And also, Taurus, you have to think about, what is important. Mercury is about to move into Capricorn. We're about to have 4 planets in Capricorn, and 4 planets in Capricorn for the average Taurus, should be good news. With 4 planets in Capricorn, you have a chance to see things in a new way, and it perhaps reminds you that that Taurus can be a deeply spiritual sign. And you are aware of things beyond yourself. You're aware of the spirituality of the earth on which you stand, and at the same time, you sort of may know that you're not alone with these 4 planets in Taurus. And do think about your beliefs. Your beliefs, should not be written in stone, but it's always important to have a set of beliefs, and a certain amount of flexibility, and being able to look at things in a new way. And I'm not just talking about your religious or spiritual beliefs, I'm talking about your political beliefs as well. Whatever is important to you. The average Taurus does believe in a lot of things, and the average Taurus can very much sort of hold on to what he or she believes. But it is a new year, and you might say, well, it's a new year, maybe a new set of ideologies, and a new set of spiritual beliefs as well. And I've got my my rising sign is Taurus, so to an extent I'm talking to myself, but it's not that I've got any immediate plans for changing my beliefs or changing my religion or anything like that. Do I have a religion? I don't know if I have a religion. It kind of depends on what side of the bed one gets out of, doesn't it? But then I'm a Gemini as well. But anyway, do make the most of these 4 planets in Capricorn. I do regard it as being a positive, though short term, with Venus making a conjunction of the Sun, there's just some danger that things from the past, maybe your family, maybe your home, just do weigh in on you and prevent you from being able to see the wood from the trees. You don't want to be combusted, and that's the problem with Sun conjunct Venus. I will be talking about this more because I do think that this Sun conjunct Venus really is an important aspect. Gemini, the Moon still is moving through your sign, and it's not doing a lot in Gemini, but maybe that's not such a bad thing. There can be moments where you can just do largely what you want, no pressure, just get through the day, 1 hour at a time, and not necessarily feeling that you have to do anything. But the Moon is slowly moving towards a square of Saturn, and this square to Saturn will be exact tomorrow. And Moon-Saturn square is not necessarily an easy aspect, but it could be quite a useful aspect. So it might be the new year, but that doesn't mean to say that there's nothing that has to be done. And Moon square Saturn can be about obligation and feeling that you have to live up to your responsibility. And also in your case, with Saturn in Pisces, it's that Pisces is quite an ambition orientated sign. As you hit the new year, you may straight away be thinking about what you need to achieve. And if that's the way you feel, Gemini, then I would have said go with it. And so today and tomorrow, do think about what it is that you want, what it is you want to get off the ground. And that perhaps links with the fact that Mercury is moving into Capricorn. So Mercury moves into Capricorn at, I think, 11 minutes past 9 in the evening, London time. So that would be sort of around lunchtime or something, or early afternoon if you're in the Americas or the United States. And so Mercury moving into Capricorn, that is a big change. Mercury represents the way you are, perhaps the way you present yourself, the way you think about yourself. And with Mercury moving out of Sagittarius into Capricorn, well, in some respects that's a good thing, because Mercury in Sagittarius is not the greatest place for Mercury to be, and there may have been times where you felt weakened while Mercury was moving through Sagittarius. Perhaps you had to pay too much attention to what other people were doing. You weren't in full control, or maybe mentally you were sort of all over the place, jumping to conclusions and worrying about this and worrying about that. But now Mercury's in Capricorn, and Capricorn is an earth sign. It's a very serious sign, especially from a Gemini perspective. And with Mercury moving into Capricorn, it's going to stay there for a few weeks. And while it is there, I would suggest that you really ask yourself what is important. You've already got 3 planets in Capricorn, now you've got a 4th, and it may link to what I was saying right at the beginning when I was talking about Moon square Saturn. Moon square Saturn can be quite an ambition orientated aspect from a Gemini perspective, and Mercury in Capricorn just adds to this. So I think Gemini, it is New Year's Day, and we think about New Year's resolutions, and of course I don't know about what your precise situation is, but if possible, Gemini, really do think about your ambitions at the moment. They are serious. And I'm not necessarily talking about career ambitions, whatever these ambitions might be, however you feel you want to proceed. Because, you've got Saturn in Pisces. Saturn stays in Pisces until, I think, February the 14th. So, over the next sort of 6 weeks or so, you've got a real chance. Perhaps you've got a chance to go back over some of the mistakes you made in the past. Maybe there were opportunities you missed. But over the next 6 weeks, you have another chance. And I'm just really encouraging you to really make the most of it. And I think that Mercury moving into Capricorn just adds to it all. And so now is your chance. So don't look back at the past with regret or sort of missed opportunities, Gemini. You do definitely have this other chance. And it is serious. I've said that Mercury moving into Capricorn is serious. But I really think that you can make something of it. And, in the process, you might have to do something quite dramatic. There are certain things that might have to be upended. That's just the way it is. You can't expect yourself to grow and develop if nothing changes around you. Maybe it's to do with living conditions, the way you're treated, maybe the way you're treating yourself. Maybe you've not created the best possible environment for yourself, and now you have to make some changes. So, Gemini, it may be a day when you have to, it's not just about what is happening today, it's about how you think about, the first 6 weeks of the year. And I think you want to really try and hit the ground running, as far as you can. And you don't want to hit the ground too much. There is a sesquiquadrate between Mars and Uranus, which I will be talking a lot about, later in the video. And this sesquiquadrate between Mars and Uranus can be quite accident prone. It can be quite troublesome, but it needn't be your problem. But just don't do anything careless. But be methodical and think about what needs to be done, and in that way you can really set yourself up for a successful 2026. Cancer. It's probably not necessary to do anything. It's the first day of the year. It's probably a holiday where you are, and if you don't feel any need for action, well, why bother? Just continue doing whatever you enjoy, and don't allow yourself to be pressurized. And it just might be as simple as that. And there are things you want to work through. Like yesterday, there are things you want to work through, and I don't think that you particularly feel any need for too much social connections. I don't think that's how you feel. So, if you've been sort of planning on getting something together, then it can probably wait. Maybe it can wait until the weekend. It's Thursday now, so wait until the weekend. And over the weekend, well, the moon will be in Cancer over the weekend, I think. Moon goes into Cancer probably tomorrow. So certainly the first part of a weekend you'll have the moon in Cancer, and so that's probably the way you should handle today, and let other people do their thing. Well, as far as other people are concerned, though, there is action in the sign Capricorn. Capricorn is, of course, your opposite sign, and we do have Mercury getting ready to move into Capricorn. And that means there will be 4 planets in this sign. So with 4 planets in Capricorn, that rather weights things away from your own sign. You look at the chart. You've got this great sort of weight of planets on the other side of the chart, and of course Capricorn can be about other people and what other people are doing, and they perhaps require attention, or at least it appears that they require attention. And with Mercury moving into Capricorn, that's perhaps something new, something you hear, someone is trying to get your attention. Now, Mercury doesn't move into Capricorn. Well, if you're in Europe or Africa, then it won't move into Capricorn until this evening. If you're in the Americas, it will move in sort of earlier. So perhaps someone is trying to get your attention. The question is, should that bother you? I don't think so. Just because other people are there, just because other people have the potential for influencing your life, it doesn't necessarily mean that you should jump to it. I don't think so. At least not today. Now, we do have a full moon coming up. That full moon is, I think, on Saturday, I think. So that full moon is it being a full moon, it's in Cancer, that full moon. So you've got a full moon in Cancer. So that very much could be about other people. And it could be about your relationship to other people and how relationships change. And of course, it is the first full moon of the year. So that might be something to prepare for. But right now, you don't have to worry about it. Just, I think in most cases, do what you feel comfortable with, and don't really worry about much else. Leo. There doesn't seem to be too much to worry about today. It's the first day of the year. We've got the Sun making a sextile to the nodal axis. So Sun making a sextile to the nodes, that might indicate that you have an opportunity to do things which are constructive. They may not get a lot of attention, but nonetheless they are things which are very much connected with who you are and where you are going. And this Sun North Node sextile is very low profile. It's not something that is immediately obvious. But it just might be the case, Leo, that what you should be doing today is just doing things quietly. Perhaps we're talking about quiet preparation, or just organizing things. Sun in Capricorn, sextile the North Node in Pisces. And it's all very easy, and it's all very straightforward. It's not interesting necessarily. It might be somewhat boring, but you're doing the right thing, and it's probably a good time to be doing it. January the 1st, not much pressure, hopefully, and you're just perhaps thinking about next week. Next week, Monday, that's the beginning of it all, isn't it? Where the year really starts in earnest, when you have to live up to your responsibilities, whatever they might be. And additionally, today we've got Mercury moving into Capricorn. Okay, it might not be until tomorrow if you're in Australia or New Zealand that Mercury moves into Capricorn, or if you're in India, for example, Mercury won't move into Capricorn until tomorrow. But Mercury is moving into Capricorn, and so with Mercury moving into Capricorn, that perhaps adds to your feeling of responsibility. And I should also say that with four planets now in Capricorn, this might be a time, Leo, to think about yourself and your body and your well-being. It is a new year, New Year's Day. It's time for resolutions. What kind of resolution do you want to make while we're at the very beginning of the year? Now, the Sun is, of course, always in Capricorn on January the 1st. And so for the average Leo, that always means there's some emphasis on the body and physicality and the routines, not just routines in an administrative sense, but the kind of routines you need to be as fit and healthy as possible. But now with 4 planets in Capricorn, I think that might really intensify the message. And we're going to have 4 planets in Capricorn for a few weeks. So over the next few weeks, Leo, it might be time to think about what you can do to make yourself feel, as good as possible about your mind and your body. And perhaps there are things which have really become pretty useless. They're not helping you. They're hindering you. They're confusing you. They might be sort of dragging you down to some extent, and you need some clarity, and you need simplicity. You want things to be straightforward. I mean, that's what you're looking for. And it's not just about how your mind works; it's about how your body works as well. So I think that would be a good way of using this this Capricorn emphasis in your chart at the moment. Plus, as I've just said, Sun is sextile the North Node. I think that you have a good sense of where you should be going, how you should be doing things, and you know that it's not about glamour, it's not about getting attention, it's just about doing what is right. And if you can do what is right for yourself, then everything should fit together, and you'll be starting off 2026 definitely on the right footing. Virgo. Mercury is changing signs. So we've had a Mercury in Sagittarius for some time. I mean, on and off, we've had Mercury in Sagittarius since I think the end of October, I think. Is that right? Yeah. So it's been a long time, and Mercury in Sagittarius, inevitably has had an impact on you. Okay, Mercury did go back into Scorpio, but it has had an impact on you, and it hasn't always necessarily been good, because Mercury is in its detriment in Sagittarius, and Sagittarius is a sign that is important to you. It might have said something about what it means to be stable, what it means to have, for example, a secure family life, to feel comfortable in your own home. And with Mercury in Sagittarius, it might at times have just been rooting you to a spot, and you just haven't quite been sure how to respond. But now that Mercury is moving into Capricorn, it is a change. And we can look at Mercury moving into Capricorn in several ways. I mean, we can look at it in the sense of Mercury moving into an earth sign, a sign which resonates to your own sign. Virgo is of course an earth sign as well, and so you should be starting to feel much better about yourself with Mercury moving into Capricorn. And then we think about Capricorn. Mercury in Sagittarius, might have been about you rather unwillingly being forced to sort of go all over the place, at least your mind being forced to go all over the place, having to think about different things, having to worry about different things, and that's not really what you wanted. And then Mercury moving into Capricorn, well, that's different. I mean, Mercury is moving into quite a sensible, staid sign, and straight away you maybe become perhaps more staid, perhaps more sensible. That doesn't mean to say boring or unimaginative, far from it, because Capricorn, from your perspective, can be about creativity. It's a very creative sign for you, Virgo. And so with 4 planets in Capricorn now, I think it's a time when you can really be yourself, and perhaps there are things that you had been wanting to do, but you couldn't do it, or you felt you couldn't do it. There was maybe there was resistance. You perhaps didn't feel you were getting enough support from your family, or there were other things to worry about. There was always something to worry about, but now things are becoming more straightforward. So I think it's very much a positive that Mercury is moving into Capricorn, and as Mercury moves into Capricorn, things just do become easier, because the way it works is we have got a square between Mercury and Neptune today, and then approximately 10 hours later, 9.5 hours later, Mercury moves into Capricorn. So that might say something about your experience of the day. Maybe the day starts with that Mercury square Neptune energy, feeling ever so slightly unsure of yourself. Perhaps a situation not helped by other people and other people's reaction to you and the kind of energy that other people are giving off. But as you go through the day, as Mercury moves away from that square to Neptune, and then when it changes sign, then things change. Yeah, you can still see the confusion. You can still see how other people might be undermining you, but it's in the past. And as time progresses, as January the 1st moves to January the 2nd, things just become just so much easier, and you feel, not just grounded, but you also feel able to do what you feel is important, without having to take any risks, without having to apologize. And you can perhaps also start aligning to your ambitions. Moon is in Gemini. Okay, the moon is making a square to Saturn, but perhaps with that moon square Saturn, which is exact tomorrow, you just may become aware of what might be holding you back, and also how to deal with it. So I think that 2026 perhaps has an ever so slightly confusing start to it because of that Mercury square Neptune. But as soon as you're aware of the confusion, you then become aware of the direction when Mercury moves into Capricorn, and suddenly you just feel better about yourself, and you feel just more comfortable, and perhaps you have confidence to do things which in the recent past you had been holding back on. Libra. There is a lot of stuff in Capricorn at the moment, and it's going to go on for a few weeks. We've got Mercury moving into Capricorn, and that means we've got 4 planets in Capricorn, and with all those planets in Capricorn, and it stays like that, it's going to be quite intense, and it stays like that for a few weeks. So what you're kind of doing is you're kind of waiting for these planets to move into Aquarius. Aren't we all waiting for them to move into Aquarius? I know we shouldn't think ahead. There's nothing wrong with Capricorn, but just maybe from a Libra perspective, it just could be a bit too much. But there are advantages in all those planets in Capricorn. It does mean, Libra, that you can perhaps sort of ground yourself even more than you have been already, and you can think about what is important. Some things are trivial, some things can be ignored, but other things are deadly serious, and it is important that you know where you are. And perhaps this is what all these planets in Capricorn are doing, and you're perhaps thinking now, and you will be thinking over the next few weeks about, for example, where you live. Are you happy where you live? Are you happy with the people who you live with, if you do live with anyone? How do you feel about your community, your immediate community? How does it feel? How do you feel in the city you're living in, the country you're living in, whatever it is? So these are questions you might be asking yourself, Libra, and you have insights. Now, just because you have an insight doesn't mean you have to take immediate action, but it just could be that in a few weeks' time, Libra, you will have a better idea about how you want to live, even where you want to live. I'm not saying you're going to move or anything like that. You might want to change your living arrangements, and that might be something you want to sort of actively work on. And you've got to be probably, as independent as possible. You've got to be able to think for yourself. And that might not always be easy. And the problem we have is that the Sun is getting rather close to Venus. We think sometimes of Sun-Venus conjunction. Oh, it's a wonderful aspect, Sun and Venus. Oh, that's nice. It's not. Sun and Venus can be a very difficult aspect because Venus is combust. So there's you, Venus, trying to make sense of things, trying to understand things, but the Sun can just burn you out. Okay, not literally burn you out, but it can be a distraction. You're trying to think about things yourself, but there's strong pressure to focus on something else, and you have to perhaps ask yourself, where might this pressure come from? I think that you have to be careful, for example, with your friends, people you talk to every day. I mean, they mean well, but that doesn't mean to say that their advice is useful. It's probably a bad idea, certainly over the next few weeks, to listen too hard to another person. And certainly it's not a good idea to just take their advice just without thinking, because you have to ask yourself, what is the process? Some people give advice, and that advice is incredibly subjective. It represents who they are. I mean, you need to be aware of that if you're listening to me. I mean, I try to be objective, but of course I'm not. And sometimes the things I say are pure me, pure my projections, and you certainly have to be aware of that. And if you're a Libra listening to me, don't take what I say at face value. Consider the possibility that I don't know what I'm talking about, or that I'm just being too subjective. I mean, okay, I'm not your friend, but it's your friend's. Okay, I try to be your friend in a general sense, but I'm not really your friend. I mean, I'm not like one of your friends who you're with all the time. Your colleagues, your acquaintances, those kind of people. Those kind of people could be dangerous, because they could confuse you. They could lead you astray. And as far as possible, Libra, you need to make up your own mind. It's your decisions, and don't feel guilty about doing things your own way, because that is definitely the right approach. And again, not just today, but over the next couple of weeks, it's important that you're as independent as possible, and you take the view that your decisions are likely to be the right decisions, and you shouldn't let anyone get in your way. Scorpio. The Sun is getting quite close to Mars. It's not there all the way, but it's a couple of degrees, and this aspect might be having an impact on you. Of course, Mars is your ruler, and you could say that Mars is now sort of about to be combust. Combustion is, it is combust technically, because two planets are combust, I think, if they're sort of 8 degrees, if they're 8 degrees apart. So that combustion is happening. And so Scorpio, don't feel that you've got all the facts, that you understand everything. Don't be arrogant. Don't be tempted to be arrogant. It's possible that there are things that you have misunderstood, or you might get your timing wrong. So how might you get your timing wrong? You might accurately understand a particular situation. You understand it, but then you have to decide, what action do you take? And maybe you'll decide to act immediately, when in actual fact it would be better to postpone action, wait until a later stage, wait until things have settled down. And it's not just the fact that the Sun is making a conjunction to Mars. As far as today is concerned, January the 1st, Mars is making a sesquiquadrate to Uranus, and sesquiquadrates are an aspect that I regard as being very important. A sesquiquadrate, 135-degree aspect, 3/8 of the circle, and that sesquiquadrate could potentially be quite destabilizing. And if you do the first thing that comes to mind, if you say the first thing that comes to mind, well, maybe you could get yourself into trouble. And you have to think about what you are doing. Mars sesquiquadrate Uranus could be about you doing something unwise, something that might be physically unwise. So whatever you're doing today, do take it easy, and it's certainly not a time to be taking risks. And risks take many forms. I mean, they can be physical risks, they can be social risks, they can be interpersonal risks. There can be risks of upsetting someone, risks of someone else getting upset. It's all possible. And perhaps you need to be careful what you say. I mean, you can use your brain. I mean, your mind is going in all sorts of directions, especially now that Mercury is moving into Capricorn. So Mercury is, we've now got 4 planets in Capricorn, or we're about to have 4 planets in Capricorn. So Mercury will, at some stage, of course, make a conjunction to Mars. That will happen. I'm not quite sure whether that conjunction happens in Capricorn or Aquarius. But all of these planets in Capricorn, now having 4 planets in Capricorn, it may be about what you have to say. It might also be about your relationship to travel. Like how do you get about? Do you use a bus? Do you have a car? Maybe you go by foot. If you are driving over the next few weeks, I think that you have to make sure that everything is in good order. With all because with 4 planets in a sign, or at least a part of your chart connected with motor vehicles, then make sure that everything is in good order. Make sure that the tires are properly inflated. The oil, water, all the stuff you have to worry about if you own a car, or if you drive a car. And of course, once you are driving, Mars sesquiquadrate Uranus, that's another way in which things could go wrong. So driving could be quite irritating. I mean, it could be quite important, but do take it seriously, and don't think that it's all going to be straightforward. I'm not saying you shouldn't drive over the next few weeks, but I'm just saying that driving does need to be taken seriously. Okay, if you travel by bus, it's not so bad because someone else takes responsibility, but it's still the whole process of moving from A to B on a regular basis could just take up a lot of your time, and could be something that at times might be frustrating, or perhaps you want to make some changes. Maybe you've been taking a wrong route, or you'd like to take a different route, or you'd like to try a different method of transport. So that might be a constructive way of using all of these planets in Capricorn. We're about to have all these planets in Capricorn, but in the end, the most important aspect today, I'm afraid, is that Mars sesquiquadrate Uranus. It has to be, because Mars is your ruler. And so stay out of trouble, and take a fairly serious approach. I mean, I'd like to be a bit lighter in my advice, but I think looking at the astrology, that I think is the best thing I can say. Sagittarius. Things are perhaps quietening down. I mean, they have been quietening down for some time. We don't have the Sagittarian emphasis that we used to have. We used to have loads of planets in Sagittarius, and today the last Sagittarian planet, Mercury, is leaving Sagittarius. So Sagittarius season is now well and truly over. And you've got 4 planets now in Capricorn, and that might mean that the focus is now very much away from you. You don't have to feel that you're in the center. You're right in the center of things anymore. And of course, it means less positivity. I mean, when I say less positivity, I mean the fire signs and the air signs are positive, and so when Mercury enters Capricorn, that means okay, Pluto will still be in Aquarius. It'll always be in Aquarius, but okay, the Moon is currently in Gemini, but tomorrow, day after, the Moon will be in Cancer. So we're dealing with a more sort of negative period, just a few weeks until planets start moving into Aquarius, and so there might be some realignment required there for you. And you you shouldn't feel that there's so much pressure to initiate. There can be pressure to initiate if you're a Sagittarian, maybe in run up to Christmas, but that's all over. And so instead, the Sagittarius, you maybe can be more relaxed. Perhaps there will be less pressure. You can let other people make the decisions, and as far as you're concerned, you can just make sure that things are in order. With 4 planets in Capricorn, Capricorn is an earth sign. Make sure that everything works, that the books balance. There's inevitably going to be a financial side to this Capricorn, to this Capricorn emphasis we're about to have over the next few weeks, and so you can be sensible, and it's worth your while being sensible. It might not be very interesting, but just being aware of what is possible financially is something you should aim to do. And I think that with good financial awareness, you're able to sort of move on and make the most of 2026. Now things will change later in the month. We will get planets moving into Aquarius, so don't feel that this is a permanent state of affairs. And additionally, you're not weak. Far from it. I mean, yesterday I mentioned the fact that Jupiter was on the Sun-Pluto midpoint. I mean, Jupiter's still on the Sun-Pluto midpoint. I mean, you can see. I mean, if you look at Jupiter's your ruler, remember. So you've got, there's Pluto, and there's a Sun-Venus conjunction. So Jupiter is on the Venus-Pluto midpoint, and Jupiter is on the Sun-Pluto midpoint as well. So that does affect you, and I think it does strengthen you as well. It gives you a powerful sense of what you can do, and also what you can achieve, maybe in the longer term. And it just could be that a lot of the action Sagittarius is taking place at an inner level. You're aware of your power for sure. And maybe you're also aware of your financial power and what you can do with money if you give yourself the chance. So there is a way perhaps in which you can get to grips with certain financial realities that in the past you might have been ignoring, but now you can really think about them. And when you think about money, and when you think about the details of money with Jupiter on the Sun-Pluto and the Venus-Pluto midpoint, I think you can really make good progress. But nothing has to be said, I don't think. I think that you can just focus on what matters, and perhaps over the next day or two, there could be some real revelations with Jupiter in that position. And so your power may not be obvious, but deep down you know it's there. And so you don't have to advertise it. And if you're being ignored, well, maybe that's a good thing to be ignored, because if you're being ignored, then you can just do your own thing in your own way. Capricorn, Mercury is moving into your sign. It moves into Capricorn at 11 minutes past 9 in the evening, London time. So sort of this afternoon, early afternoon, perhaps in the Americas, Mercury will be moving into Capricorn. Mercury won't be moving into Capricorn until tomorrow if you're in India or Australia or New Zealand, for example. But, when Mercury does move into Capricorn, whenever that is, we will have 4 planets in your sign. 4 planets. That is a huge Capricorn emphasis. And I think that that might mean that you perhaps have more responsibility than usual. You're more in the center of things, and it's probably going to be relatively easy for you to project yourself, because everything will be in the right place and you will understand what is going on. So the new year is quite an important time for you. And while those 4 planets are in Capricorn over the next few weeks, then really give it your best shot, whatever it is that you've been holding back on. And there's no time to delay. You should, get on with it. Now, that doesn't mean to say that today, January the 1st, you have to immediately do stuff. I mean, I don't think you have to. I mean, you can do things in a sort of a quiet way. I don't think there's any immediate pressure for you to sort of project your personality, for example. And part of the issue might be Capricorn, but at an unconscious level, you're preparing for a full moon. So although it's the beginning of the year, and we think of sort of new beginnings, of course, by definition, January the 1st, we have on January the 3rd a full moon. And so this full moon it feels a bit strange to have a full moon right after the new year. And this full moon may sort of represent the culmination of things happening around Christmas, even before Christmas, since the previous full moon. I think, when was that previous full moon? I think something like, off the top of my head, 21st, 22nd of December. So the full moon is something you're preparing for. And that things aren't entirely resolved, that things have to be resolved. And so maybe Saturday, the weekend, is in some respects more important than today, even though today is January the 1st. So you're now at a stage where you're bringing things together. You're starting to understand things as you approach the full moon, and this understanding can take many different levels, and it could be about other people. Remember, this is going to be a Cancer full moon. So Cancer is your opposite sign. Cancer is a sign that often is connected with relationships and the important people in your life. And so, you with this full moon coming up, although in general it is a time of where you have to be considering doing things, being very positive with all these planets in Capricorn. Short term, very short term, maybe not. You're still building things, and you're still trying to understand, what this lunation cycle, is all about. So that's possibly the right approach. Not feeling that you have to definitely make an impact, but in your own private world, certainly there's a lot going on, and you're thinking about what can be done, and perhaps what should be done. And so the new year, it sort of gets off to perhaps a strange start. It doesn't entirely feel like the new year. It almost feels like the end of the previous year. So January the 1st, I don't think it's a beginning, really. Not for you. It's more like you're sort of halfway through something, and in particular, you're halfway through coming to a set of conclusions. And over the next few days, I think that things overall will be a lot clearer. Now, going back to these Capricorn planets, I mean, things do have to be said about it. And, we do have a conjunction between the Sun and Mars starting to form. In fact, we've got a conjunction between the Sun and Venus forming. So the Sun is conjunct Venus, it's conjunct Mars, and it certainly gives you power. There's no doubt about that at all. But it might also, at the same time, be too much of a good thing. And there's a possibility, for example, that you make certain things too personal. And if you make certain things too personal, they're all about you and all about your view of the world, and you don't consider alternative views, then there's a danger that you make mistakes, and these mistakes could take several different forms. I mean, there may be social mistakes, not fully understanding what another person is experiencing. Also, there could be mistakes of direction. You thinking that this is the right direction, when in fact it's not the right direction, and it should be absolutely obvious that it's not the right direction, but you're just being too focused on yourself. And that's something you have to be aware of over the next few weeks, certainly over the next week, but it shouldn't be a problem. Because being a Capricorn, you're capable of great self-awareness, and so do consider how your own self and your belief in yourself could trip you up. It needn't trip you up, but I just feel I have to warn you about that. Yeah, it shouldn't happen, but I'm just saying it could happen. But I'm just hoping that your fundamental self-awareness will see you through. Aquarius. It's a day, Aquarius, when the moon is in Gemini. The moon is in Gemini, throughout the day, and that, all things being equal, is quite pleasant. I mean, the moon in Gemini, it's an air sign. It's not making any aspects, and there are certain advantages in the moon not making any aspects. It can do what it likes. Maybe you can do what you like. So if you want to be free, you want to do something you enjoy, then go ahead, but don't necessarily expect it to lead anywhere. Perhaps it's a time to be doing things for their own sake and not thinking beyond the situation. If you're trying to build something or set yourself up for the future, is that going to work? Probably not. And so maybe just take the view, it's January the 1st, nothing has to be done, nothing has to be resolved, nothing perhaps will be resolved, and that's the way it goes. And additionally, we've got Mercury moving out of Sagittarius into Capricorn, and so we've got 4 planets in Capricorn. And this might be a time when many Aquarians feel that they just don't want to have a particularly high profile. They've got things that they want to do. They don't have to involve other people, and perhaps the more alone you are, the better. I mean, when I say alone, I don't mean lonely, but why do you need other people to be involved in whatever you're doing? So I think that that would be probably the right approach, and not to feel pressurized, and not to feel that achievement it matters short term. You don't have to score points. You don't have to do better than another person. It's not a competition. It really absolutely shouldn't be a competition. And instead, there are things to think about. And perhaps also, Aquarius, there are things to dream about. Do listen to your dreams. Your dreams, may be telling you things, things that you perhaps aren't fully aware of, or things that you haven't fully seen the connections. You've got the pieces of a puzzle, but you haven't brought it together. And sometimes when in that situation, it's during one's dreams that it can all be all together, come all together, and there can be sort of moments of realization. And of course, dreams can take many forms. It can be about where your mind is drifting, and so that's is something sort of going on today. If there was a warning to give over the course of the day, I'd probably say that it related to the fact that there's a sesquiquadrate between Mars and Uranus. And, the issue is the fact that, Uranus is in Uranus is in Taurus. It is in a part of your chart which is connected with the home and the family, and Uranus has recently gone back into Taurus. You did think that Uranus was in Gemini, then it went retrograde back into Taurus, and that may say something about your home and whatever it is that you regard as being comfortable and secure. And then Mars comes along, and that Mars sesquiquadrate Uranus might present a situation which makes you ever so slightly worried or uncertain. It might be a drama, a small drama. It might be just a realization. It could also be about something not working, Mars sesquiquadrate Uranus, just something malfunctioning, something breaking, perhaps in the home. So if you are at home, just, take it slowly. When you're dealing with the objects in your home, don't force them. Don't take risks. Don't leave things on the boil. Don't leave things to chance. Boiling kettles need to be attended to. So, I mean, I'm not saying this is going to happen. I'm sure it won't happen, but it does seem to me that Mars sesquiquadrate Uranus could be just a bit of a problem aspect if it happens. If you're it depends on your situation, but if you're playing with home appliances, you're doing a lot of cooking, or you're trying to fix things, then Mars sesquiquadrate Uranus could be a problem aspect. Pisces. We have the moon moving through Gemini all day long, and the moon is not really doing anything in Gemini. And so, with the moon in Gemini, it might be the case that you just feel that you want to keep a low profile. I mean, why not? I mean, why have attention that you don't need? And of course, it is January the 1st, so it's a holiday. It's often a holiday. Depends where you are. Assume it's a holiday. So there's nothing that absolutely needs to be done, I don't think. I mean, there might be apparent pressure, but when you actually look at it, it's not as urgent as it seems. So there shouldn't be any urgency. And again, the moon does make no aspects. Okay, the moon does make a square to Saturn tomorrow, but I'll be talking about that in my horoscopes for Friday. We do have Mercury moving into Capricorn. So Mercury moving into Capricorn, that may say something about another person. Because, Mercury's been in Sagittarius for a long time. Mercury is ruler of Virgo. Virgo is your opposite sign. So Mercury might say something about another person's spirits, how someone feels. So with Mercury moving into Capricorn, someone might change, and probably change for the better. Because Mercury moving into Capricorn, well, Mercury functions better in Capricorn than in Sagittarius. Someone who might have been all over the place, had perhaps been a little bit unstable, it may mean that they sort of someone calms down. Mercury in Capricorn may also mean that someone new arrives on the scene, perhaps a friend, someone new to talk to. So although Pisces, a lot of your energy is going down, down towards, yourself and whatever your sacred earth is, you should pay some attention to what's going on, out there in the world. And there are people to talk to, people to communicate with, not just today, but, over the next few weeks. There are, 4 planets in Capricorn, and those 4 planets in Capricorn can have a social dimension for sure. And so, do not ignore your social life. There are people to meet, people who could be very good for you. And at the same time, Pisces, don't forget your own power. Even though I don't think that you want to project your power, I think you can if you want. And it's connected with Jupiter. Jupiter, as I think I said yesterday, Jupiter is if you look at the chart, you've got Jupiter is opposition the Sun, Pluto midpoint. You can see you've got all these planets, Venus, Sun, Mars, Pluto, opposition Jupiter. So in a general sense, but if you want to be precise about it, today Jupiter is on the Venus-Pluto midpoint. It's also on the Sun-Pluto midpoint. And so that says something about your power. If you want to be powerful, if you want to assert yourself, I think that you very much can. And you can do it in a way that isn't dramatic. You don't, indeed, probably the less dramatic it is, the better. You do it in a kind of understated way, but nonetheless, your power and your ability to control may in the end become quite obvious. So those are my forecasts for today. January the 1st, at least my 12 sign forecasts. And now it's time to turn to the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Thursday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And of course, Thursday is January the 1st. And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 14, which is possession in great measure. And that is a very good hexagram to be starting the year off with. Possession in great measure. It can be about possessions financially, might be. It could also be about our knowledge, new knowledge, our experience. It's not just about gaining new possessions. It's just about being aware of what we have. And it seems that we have a lot. So if you are feeling sorry for yourself, you're feeling you maybe haven't got enough money, you're not good enough, or you haven't got enough experience or knowledge or whatever. No, it's not true. This I Ching or at least this hexagram is reminding you of how much you have and what you are starting the year with. And you could say that because this is the first reading of the year, this is the January the 1st reading, it might say something about the whole of 2026. Maybe I'm being over positive, but I mean, let's be positive. 14 possession in great measure. So yeah, over the year. Of course, I wasn't asking about the year ahead. I was just asking about today. But if you regard January the 1st as a fractal of the whole of 2026, then I do think that things look good. Now, this hexagram, it doesn't move. There are no moving lines. It doesn't develop into anything. And so I think that maybe what this hexagram is saying is, well, count your blessings. We all have grievances. There are things we didn't achieve last year. There are things we're worried about. But take what we have. Take what we have, maybe in terms of our spiritual worth. We're all developing. Sometimes it doesn't seem like it, and whatever we have that is of value, we will take with us. We will take it with us, or perhaps to our next incarnation if we happen to believe in reincarnation. And that's just a reminder that this hexagram is not just about money, but it could be about money. And so if you're coming into this reading with worries about money, then possession in great measure suggests that the money may become available. Maybe not even if it doesn't come today. This may be a year when you can really tune into what you have, and I think that that is very positive. But to get some sort of added insights into this hexagram, it's a good idea to look at the nuclear hexagram, the hexagram in the middle. So if we knock off the top and the bottom lines, we're going to see 5 lines, 5 unbroken lines with a broken line at the top. So the hexagram in the middle is hexagram number 43, which is breakthrough. And this is kind of interesting because breakthrough is not necessarily a particularly fortunate hexagram. It's about having to escape from something. Something is just going wrong and we have to leave. And some of us might feel as we move from 2025 to 2026 that it's an escape, that we look back at 2025 and we look at the dangers of 2025 and the things perhaps that have gone wrong in our lives in 2025 and the threats we had to face in 2025, and we're kind of relieved to have got to 2026. Yeah, celebrate, we're still alive, it's 2026. Well, I'm still recording this it's 10:02 a.m. on the 31st of December, where I am here in Washington State. So I have got 14 hours left. I've got to get through the next 14 hours to get to 2026. But breakthrough does indicate that there is an escape, something that we had to get away from, and now that we've got away from it, or we are getting away from it, We saw the danger, we ran, and now we've got through to the other side, and we are dealing with possession in great measure. So we've taken things with us from 2025 to 2026. We've kept things secure, and we know what we're good at. We know what we're bad at as well, but we know what we're good at. We've got this store of knowledge, and even if we haven't got much money, it's perhaps enough money to achieve whatever it is we need to achieve. So I think that there is a positive beginning here to 2026, and I think that it is a time perhaps to count our blessings and to be grateful for what we have. We don't have to be complacent. I mean, and we should regard what we have as the basis for something else, as a basis for future gains. And so possession in great measure can be an ongoing process. If there's something more we want to gather and we know it's right for us, then over 2026 and certainly for today, I think we can start that process. So now I want to go back to the astrology, and I just want to look at 2026 and how does one really think about 2026. And I'm not going to be looking really at sort of big sort of outer planet conjunctions and so forth. Okay, if we're talking about 2026, let's just look at the chart for 2026. So here's a moment 2026 starts. By the way, I've set that for Washington DC. Of course, if we are talking about 2026, we are aware that Saturn and Neptune are soon going to go into Aries. And they've been in Pisces, and this Saturn and Neptune in Pisces, it's kind of been a bit of a stopping off. We were ready to go ploughing into Aries, and what all of that meant, and we've just stopped. We've gone back into Pisces, and I think that as I've said on numerous occasions, I think that Saturn and Neptune in Pisces is they are about sacrifice, and wanting to sacrifice oneself for anything, and perhaps wanting to sacrifice one's society for anything. And Saturn and Neptune in Pisces, particularly the Neptune in Pisces, has been an overdose of compassion. I mean, compassion is supposed to be a good thing, but one can have too much compassion. And I think that is what people have become aware of, compassion which becomes self-destructive and self-denying. And, I mean, that is, of course, what I think Nietzsche might say. But Nietzsche is in his book on ethics is talking about how Judeo-Christianity is always about saying no. You've got to deny yourself things. You've got to always think about other people, and you've always got to think about the sorrow of the world, and you can't really be yourself. And I think that Saturn and Neptune is Neptune in Pisces, all about saying no. It's about apologizing for the past, apologizing for one's history, doing everything for tiny minorities, for example, the obsession, the transgender obsession. I mean, I have to be careful here, but maybe being too concerned about refugees. I'm not giving a political opinion here, but that is a perception here. But that, I think, is a Neptune in Pisces thing. And with Saturn and Neptune moving into Aries, things are going to change. I mean, they've already started to change, and I think that although Trump, when Trump was elected, Saturn and Neptune, I think, were both in Pisces. Soon after his election, Neptune going into Aries, I think very much was linked with Trump being elected, and now that Saturn and Neptune are going into Aries in earnest in the beginning of this year, we're going to see something very different. And of course, with Neptune in Aries, what people are looking for, I think, is leadership, strong leadership. Now, I don't know whether Donald Trump is able to provide that leadership. I think there are some doubts about that, but that is what people are looking for. And I also think of the possibility it's just a possibility. If you think about what, certainly in a United States context, people are saying that it's all falling apart for Trump. Of course, people on the left are saying that it's all falling apart for Trump, and people are sort of excitedly looking at the midterms, thinking how Trump is going to do very badly, but Republicans are going to do badly. I'm not entirely convinced at this stage. I haven't looked at the midterms in detail, or in any way, shape, or form, actually. But if you take the view that Saturn represents the Democrats and Jupiter represents the Republicans, I think that there is a strong argument for that. There's a book, Horary Judgment, Horary Astrology and a Judgment of Events, which talks about the two parties in America. And so if you take Saturn as being the Democrats, Saturn is going to go into Aries soon, Valentine's Day, February the 14th, and it might well be that when Saturn goes into Aries, things don't look quite so good for the Democrats for one reason or another. And so the midterms will take place while Saturn is in Aries. So, we shouldn't think that it's all doom and gloom for the Republicans at the moment, as some people on the left are trying to claim. And, a lot of it might have to do with the fact that Saturn and Neptune are in Aries, and that many of the concerns of Neptune, the self-denying concerns of Neptune in Pisces, the compassion, of Neptune in Pisces, people are not going to be just compassionate for the sake of it. People are going to be focused on their own interests, and so that is going to be a change for good, because now when Neptune goes into Aries, that's done. I'm not necessarily enthused about Neptune going into Aries. I think one of the biggest problems of Neptune going into Aries is, well, we're already starting to see it. If you've got Neptune in Aries, you can do what you like. Certainly in the American context, Trump couldn't care less about the environment as far as I can see. Neptune's going to be in Aries until the late 2030s. So how much damage is going to be done to the environment between now and the late 2030s? Then Neptune goes into Taurus. 2038, Neptune going to Taurus. We're going to see, I believe, a massive concern with the environment. It's going to be overwhelming. People really are going to be concerned with the environment in a way we've never seen before. But we've got a long time to wait for that. Now, as far as other things are concerned, well, if we're trying to understand this year, 2026, we could look at the start of 2026, the very beginning, the chart of 2026 as a political event, not an astronomical or an astrological event. And the question is that really worth doing? Well, let me just give you an example of a chart for a previous year. So here is a chart for 1939, beginning of 1939, midnight 1939. The start of 1939, set for Warsaw. Of course, on September the 1st, 1939, the Germans invaded Poland, and it represented a complete, obviously, a disaster for Poland. And so this set for Warsaw, you see Saturn is exactly on the descendant. That's very clear. Saturn on the descendant, a catastrophic loss for this country. And Saturn in Aries, Saturn fallen in Aries. And additionally, Mars is opposition Uranus. So aside from the fact that this is set for Warsaw, this was a year that started with Mars opposition Uranus, which started certainly for Poland with Saturn on the descendant. But that Mars opposition Uranus did define 1939, because in the end it was the beginning of the Second World War on September the 1st, when the Germans invaded Poland. So you might say that we should be looking at the beginning of the year to get an idea about what it's going to be like. So if we turn to 2026, set for Washington, set for Washington DC. Now, when you're dealing with these charts, it's always going to be the same, roughly. So if you want to know what's happening in Moscow or Russia or the UK, you'd still go for that midnight position. And so when you've got a midnight position, the sun is always going to be pretty close to the descendant. I mean, that's just the way it is. I mean, that's so it's a midnight chart where the sun is. Sorry, did I say descendant? I mean the IC. The sun is always going to be on the IC because it's a midnight chart, not necessarily exactly on the IC, because different countries have different time zones. So when you see the sun on the IC in this horoscope for Washington DC, that is totally unexceptional. That's always going to happen with this kind of chart. But we can get some sort of added detail here because we have this year starts with a Venus-Sun-Mars conjunction, obviously close to the IC. Now, the Sun and Venus can be often relatively close to the Sun, but Mars is not tied to the Sun at all. So we do have Mars on the IC, and additionally, as I've been saying, Mars is sesquiquadrate. Mars is sesquiquadrate Uranus. So this year starts with Mars sesquiquadrate Uranus. Now, I think that might indicate that this year is going to potentially be fraught with conflict. We saw in a chart for 1939, if you're in the United States or the Soviet Union in 1939, that conflict didn't have an impact on you. But it's certainly, if you were in Poland, it certainly did. And it was the beginning of the First World War. Now, I am not saying that a world war is going to begin, but I'm just saying that there is a high level of conflict here. And when we see Mars on the IC, we should not forget the inauguration chart of Donald Trump. As here's Donald Trump's inauguration, just to show you what I mean. Mars is on the IC, so we're getting this Mars on the IC picture here. So the question is, what kind of conflicts is the United States going to be getting itself involved with? And of course, when you see Mars in this position at 12 degrees 51 Capricorn, you should immediately be concerned because the United States has its sun at 1319 Cancer. So here's the United States' sun. There's the United States' chart. And the United States, there's its sun. So basically, at the beginning of the year, Mars is opposition the United States' sun. Now, that conflict could come from anywhere. Is it going to come from Ukraine, or is it Venezuela, or is it some internal conflict? I mean, that could be what it's about. And it's not an easy time for the United States, but it's not an easy time for the world as well, because the whole world, we start every New Year's Day. Okay, the ascendants may be slightly different, but the year kicks off with Mars sesquiquadrate Uranus, and there is a run up to a full moon. So we just got past January the 1st when we have a full moon on January the 3rd. So this is a full moon set for Washington DC, and this full moon set for Washington DC, I will be talking about this full moon in a couple of days' time in more detail, but the main thing to take away from this full moon set for Washington, D.C. is, firstly, Saturn is on the IC, and secondly, this full moon is at 13 degrees 2 Cancer. So in other words, this full moon is conjunct Mars, and it is conjunct the United States' sun. Sorry, it is. It's conjunct the United States' sun. So United States very much impacted by this full moon, and the United States is also impacted by the Mars sesquiquadrate Uranus, because Uranus at the moment is semi-square the United States' sun. And yeah, Uranus goes retrograde, it will go station, and it will station forward. So the question is, what is America planning on getting itself involved in over the course of 2026? One's immediate thought is it's Ukraine, but maybe it's not. I think that perhaps the United States has a good understanding of the dynamics in Ukraine, and the fact that Russia will do whatever Russia wants to do, and I think Trump kind of recognizes that. So there is a certain realism regarding Ukraine, but it just might be in other areas. And I mean, we think about Iran, for example. I mean, Iran, by the way, is a country that we should be paying attention to. So before I go, I'm just going to just set up. This is New Year's Day in Iran. So I mean, it's rather from Washington D.C. I mean, I'm not saying that it's necessarily going to be significant, and of course, I believe that many Iranians take the view that New Year starts not on January the 1st, but instead on March the 21st. I mean, that's a more reasonable time to think of New Year. New Year should start really with the spring equinox. But if we do look at Iran set for January the 1st, because I think what's happened in Iran is that the value of the rial has collapsed. And of course, it's difficult to know how much it's collapsed, because there's a black market rate and there's an official rate, but the black market rate is all over the place, and so this could potentially be a threat to the government. I will be looking at Iran so here's a chart for New Year's Day in Iran. So you can see it's obviously going to be similar. I mean, almost identical to the New Year chart for Washington. But the moon will be different. The moon will have moved on slightly, and we still get this broader picture that the sun, as everywhere. The Sun, Venus, and Mars are going to be conjunct the IC. In fact, Mars is further away from the IC in New Year, the stroke of midnight in Tehran, than it is in Washington. So yeah, I think we have to think very hard about what is happening in America at the moment, because there is evidence that things really are stirring up, and I will be looking at this again very soon. I mean, when I do my forecast for the weekend, I'll be looking again at this full moon, because I think it really is quite important. Anyway, Happy New Year. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.